The sun had just started setting over the Sacramento strip mall when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe. He's gone. The voice was flat, mechanical. My son, Brian. I hadn't heard from him in 12 years. Robert died Tuesday. Stroke. Quick. My hand trembled against the steering wheel. Robert. My ex-husband. The man who'd destroyed my life and turned my only child against me. Funeral Saturday. Will reading Monday at 10. Phillips and Morgan Law, downtown. There was a pause. I know why you're calling. Don't bother. Dad made sure you'd get exactly what you deserve. Nothing. The line went dead. I sat there in my aging Honda, watching the last customers trickle out of the hair salon where I'd been doing books for the past 6 hours. 12 years. 12 years since the scandal. 12 years since I'd lost my son, my home, my reputation. 12 years since the whispers started in our church, at the country club, in every grocery store checkout line in Fresno. Patricia Sullivan cheated on her husband. With their ranch foreman, no less. Shameless. Robert Sullivan built that cattle empire from nothing, and this is how she repays him? Poor Brian. Having a mother like that. I remembered the day it all exploded. Brian was 16, captain of his high school football team, dating the homecoming queen, living the perfect California ranch kid life. Then came that September afternoon when Robert called a family meeting in our great room, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking 40,000 acres of prime cattle land. He had photos, printed out, scattered across the coffee table. Me and Miguel, our ranch foreman, getting into his truck together, standing close at a fence line. Him touching my shoulder, all innocent moments, but the camera angles, the timing, the selection, it looked damning. I hired a private investigator, Robert said, his voice breaking in all the right places. I'm sorry, Brian. Your mother's been having an affair for 6 months. That's a lie, I'd said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Robert, you know these are out of context. Miguel and I work together. We run the ranch operations together. The investigator has testimony from 3 ranch hands. They've seen you meeting Miguel at the line shack, staying there for hours. Robert's eyes were red, but I knew him well enough to see the calculation behind the tears. I didn't want to believe it either. Brian looked at me like I'd shot him. Mom? It's not true. Baby, I swear it's not true. But Robert had built his case too well. The witnesses who'd been paid off, the manipulated timeline, the fact that Miguel had suddenly quit and disappeared, a check for $50,000 buying his silence and his absence, no one to contradict Robert's story. The divorce was brutal. Texas is a community property state, but adultery changes things. Robert's lawyers painted me as a woman who'd betrayed her marriage vows, who'd carried on a tawdry affair right under her family's nose, who'd disrespected her son and her husband. I got nothing. No share of the ranch that I'd helped build from 2,000 acres to 40,000. No alimony. No custody. Brian was old enough to choose, and he chose his father without hesitation. The judge awarded me my personal belongings and $5,000. From a marital estate worth over $20 million. I moved to Sacramento, 8 hours north, far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone from my old life. I got my CPA license, something I'd been working on before the divorce consumed everything. I started doing books for small businesses, the kind that couldn't afford a big firm. Hair salons, auto shops, family restaurants. I lived in a studio apartment above a Vietnamese bakery. The smell of fresh banh mi woke me every morning. I sent Brian cards on his birthday, at Christmas, when he graduated high school. They came back unopened. I watched from afar through Facebook profiles I shouldn't have been looking at. Brian finished at UC Davis with a degree in agricultural business. Of course he did. He was always meant to run the ranch. He married Heather, a girl from another cattle family. They had a daughter, Emma, my granddaughter who I'd never met. The posts showed a life I recognized. Robert and Brian at cattle auctions, the Sullivan Ranch expanding into organic beef, awards at the state fair, and never, not once, any mention of me. I'd been erased from their history, the unfaithful wife who'd nearly destroyed everything. Now Robert was dead, and Brian thought I was calling about money. I hadn't been. I just wanted to hear my son's voice. Saturday's funeral was held at Street Catherine's, the church where Brian had been baptized, where we'd attended every Sunday for 18 years. I stayed in the back, behind 400 mourners. The Sullivan Ranch employed 60 people. Everyone came. Brian stood at the front in a black suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. He was tall now, broader than I remembered. He had Robert's jaw, my eyes. His wife Heather stood beside him, holding their daughter. Emma was maybe 3 years old, wearing a tiny black dress. My granddaughter. I'd missed her entire life. The eulogies painted Robert as a pillar of the community, a man of integrity who'd built an empire through honest work, a devoted father who'd raised his son right despite, as one speaker delicately put it, personal betrayals that would have broken a lesser man. No one mentioned my name, but everyone knew who they meant. I left before the reception, before Brian could see me and feel obligated to acknowledge the woman who'd abandoned him. Because that's what he believed, that I'd chosen an affair over my family, that I'd walked away rather than fight for him. Monday morning arrived cold and sharp. One of those Northern California winter days where the sky is painfully blue. Phillips and Morgan occupied a restored Victorian in downtown Fresno. I'd been here once before, 20 years ago, when Robert and I were setting up our estate plan, back when we were partners, back when I thought we'd grow old together on that ranch. The receptionist looked startled when I gave my name. "Oh, yes, Mr. Sullivan is already in the conference room. Second floor, first door on your right." I climbed the narrow stairs, my sensible flat silent on the runner. The conference room had been updated since I'd last been here. Sleek table, leather chairs, a view of the courthouse across the street. Brian sat at the head of the table. He wore jeans and a pearl-snap shirt, boots propped on the chair beside him, ranch casual for a ranch king. He didn't look up from his phone when I entered. Patricia. Not mom, not mother. My first name. Spoken like a curse. "Hello, Brian." I took a seat at the opposite end of the table, 12 feet of polished wood between us, a metaphor if there ever was one. We sat in silence for 10 minutes. Brian typed on his phone. I studied the law books on the shelves, the framed degrees, anything but my son's profile. He looked so much like Robert. Same stubborn set to his jaw. Same way of holding his shoulders. Footsteps in the hall. Martin Phillips entered, carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy. He was 70 now, silver-haired and distinguished. He'd handled our estate planning decades ago. He'd represented Robert in the divorce. His eyes met mine briefly. Something flickered there. Regret? Guilt? It passed too quickly to tell. "Brian." "Patricia. Thank you for coming." He took a seat between us, physically neutral. "I know this is difficult." "Let's just get this done," Brian said, not looking up from his phone. "I need to get back to the ranch. We're moving cattle today." "Of course." Martin opened his briefcase. Inside were thick documents and what looked like a USB drive. Robert was very specific about how he wanted this handled. He updated this will 4 months ago, after his diagnosis. I blinked. Diagnosis? Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The stroke was a complication. Martin pulled out his reading glasses. He wanted you both present for this reading. No exceptions. He was quite insistent. Brian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Martin began reading. The formal language rolled out. Robert Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, revoking all previous wills, appointing Martin as executor. Then the bequests. To my son, Brian James Sullivan, I leave the following. The Sullivan Ranch, all 40,000 acres, including all structures, equipment, livestock, and operations. Brian's shoulders relaxed slightly. The ranch. The heart of everything. I also leave him my shares in Sullivan Beef Company, representing 75% ownership. Brian sat up straighter. The company they'd built together, selling organic beef to high-end restaurants and grocery chains. It was worth millions. Additionally, I leave him my collection of vintage trucks and cars, my gun collection, and all personal effects. Brian almost smiled. Almost. However, Martin continued, his voice careful, these bequests come with certain revelations that Brian needs to understand. Brian frowned. Revelations? Let me continue. Martin turned a page. The Sullivan Ranch currently carries a debt load of $12 million. Your father took out loans against the property over the past 5 years to expand operations. The ranch is profitable, but the debt service is significant. The color drained from Brian's face slightly. 12 million? The beef company is also facing challenges. 3 major contracts were lost last quarter. Your father made some aggressive expansion decisions that haven't yet paid off. The company is solvent, but it will require careful management and probably additional capital investment. Brian was gripping the edge of the table now. Your father wanted you to understand, Martin said gently, that the empire you're inheriting isn't quite what it appears from the outside. It's real, it's substantial, but it comes with obligations and challenges. Fine, Brian bit out. I can handle it. I've been running that ranch with Dad for 10 years. I know what I'm doing. Your father believed that, which is why he's trusting you with it. Martin turned another page. Now, to Patricia Ann Sullivan, my ex-wife. I braced myself. Here it came. The final insult. Probably $1, just to make sure I couldn't contest being forgotten. I leave the sum of $50. Brian laughed. It was harsh, ugly, echoing in the quiet room. $50. That's generous, considering what you did. I said nothing. What was there to say? $50 was $45 more than I expected. That's about what you deserve, Brian continued, his voice sharp with satisfaction despite the news about the ranch debt. You destroyed our family for an affair. You didn't even fight for me. Just took your payout and left. I didn't get a payout, I said quietly. I got $5,000 in my clothes. Because you cheated. Actions have consequences. Martin was turning pages. If I may continue. To Patricia, I additionally leave the following. My head snapped up. Following? The house in Carmel that I purchased 8 years ago, valued at $19 million. The room went silent. My investment portfolio, held in accounts at Morgan Stanley, valued at approximately $87 million. Brian stared at Martin like he'd started speaking Mandarin. My shares in Sullivan Beef Company, the remaining 25%, valued at approximately $32 million. No, Brian whispered. My personal bank accounts, containing approximately $14 million. My life insurance policy, with Patricia as beneficiary, paying out $25 million. And a property in Montana, a ranch of 15,000 acres, valued at approximately $13 million. I couldn't breathe. The numbers were swimming. All told, I leave Patricia approximately $190 million in liquid and fixed assets. No. Brian stood so fast his chair fell backward. This is insane. He was dying. The cancer got to his brain. I'll contest this. He was completely lucid, Martin interrupted firmly. I have documentation from his oncologist and 2 neurologists confirming his mental competency, along with video testimony from Robert himself, explaining his decisions. Martin pulled out the USB drive. Which brings me to the final component of the will. Robert recorded a message for you both. He insisted it be played during this reading. I don't want to hear it, Brian said, but he didn't move toward the door. Martin plugged the drive into his laptop and turned the screen so we both could see. Robert's face appeared. He was thinner than I remembered. His skin gray. The cancer had ravaged him, but his eyes were clear. Brian. Patricia, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and Martin has just told you about the will. Robert coughed, took a sip of water. Brian, I know you're angry right now. You feel betrayed. Good. That's exactly how your mother felt 14 years ago when I framed her for adultery. The words hung in the air like smoke. Yes, framed. Your mother never had an affair. Not with Miguel, not with anyone. She was faithful to me for 23 years of marriage. I was the one who cheated. Brian's knees buckled. He grabbed the table for support. I'd been having an affair with Diane Morrison for 2 years. You remember Diane, Brian? She was on the church hospitality committee with your mother. Her husband Tom was my business partner in the feedlot venture that failed. On screen, Robert's face twisted with something like shame. When Tom found out about the affair, he threatened to expose me, to divorce Diane and take her for everything, which would have exposed my finances to scrutiny. And there were problems, son. I'd been hiding losses, making bad investments, borrowing against the ranch. No, Brian said, but it came out as a moan. I panicked. If the affair came out, the financial irregularities would come out. I'd lose everything. So, I made a plan. I paid Miguel $50,000 to disappear and keep quiet. I paid 3 ranch hands to lie about seeing your mother with him. I hired an investigator to follow your mother and take photos that looked suspicious. And then I set it all up, like she was the one cheating. Tears were streaming down Brian's face now. Your mother figured it out within 2 days. She found the payment to Miguel in my desk. But by then, I'd already told you. Already told our friends. Already started the divorce. She came to me and said she knew the truth. Said she could prove it. Robert paused to catch his breath. I told her if she tried, I'd make sure she never saw you again. I told her I'd drag it out in court for years. I'd spend every dollar we had to paint her as an unfit mother. And I told her you'd already chosen to believe me, that if she tried to tell you the truth, you'd just think she was lying to save herself. So she backed down. She took the deal my lawyers offered. She left quietly. She let me keep my reputation, keep the ranch, keep you. She let everyone believe she was the cheater because she knew that was the only way you and I could have a normal life together. Brian was sobbing now, his hands over his face. Son, your mother is not an adulteress. She's not the woman who abandoned you. She's a woman who loved you so much she let you hate her for 14 years so you could have a relationship with your father. She's a woman who sacrificed everything, her home, her reputation, her son, so I wouldn't destroy our family in a bitter court battle. Robert coughed again, longer this time. When he recovered, his voice was weaker. I'm giving her most of the money because it's restitution. It's what she should have gotten in the divorce. It's the life I stole from her. The Montana ranch, that's something new. I bought it with money I made after the divorce. I want her to have a fresh start. A place that's not tainted by our history. The debt on the Sullivan Ranch? That's real, son. That's what I actually built. I leveraged everything to expand, and it's not all paying off yet. I'm leaving you the reality of our business, not the fantasy I showed everyone. Robert looked directly into the camera now. Brian, you have a choice. You can contest this will. You can fight for money that should have been your mother's all along. You can stay angry at her for sins she didn't commit. Or you can be better than I was. You can acknowledge the truth. You can ask your mother for forgiveness for 14 years of hatred she didn't deserve. I'm giving you the ranch and the business because I want you to understand that nothing built on lies can last. The foundation will always crack. Real success, real integrity that comes from truth. Your mother has more integrity in her little finger than I had in my whole body. Robert's eyes were wet now. Patricia, I know you're watching this. I know sorry doesn't even begin to cover it. You could have exposed me at any time. You could have told Brian the truth. You could have fought me. You never did. You kept your word. You let me be the good guy in our son's life, even though it meant being the villain in his. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope this money can give you back some of what I took. You should have had these years. You should have known your grandson. You should have had the respect you earned. I stole all of that. I'm sorry. Robert's face disappeared, replaced by a black screen. The room was absolutely silent except for Brian's ragged breathing. Mom. The word broke something in me. The first time in 14 years. Is it true? His voice was destroyed. You never? No. My voice shook. I never cheated. I never even thought about it. I loved your father. And I loved you more than anything. But why? He turned to face me fully, and I saw the 16-year-old boy in his face again. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you fight? Because you needed a father. And he threatened to make it so ugly, so drawn out. You'd already chosen to believe him, baby. You looked at me with such hatred that day. If I'd tried to tell you the truth then, you'd have just thought I was lying. I believed him. Brian's voice cracked. God, I believed every word, and I hated you. I hated you so much. I know. I got married and I didn't invite you. Emma was born and I didn't tell you. I had this whole life and I cut you out of every single part of it because I thought he couldn't finish. He walked around the table. For a moment I thought he might leave, might run away from the horrible truth. Instead, he dropped to his knees beside my chair, this grown man, this father himself, and he sobbed like the child he'd been when I lost him. I'm so sorry. Mom, I'm so sorry. I put my arms around him, feeling how much bigger he was now, how much life I'd missed. It's okay, sweetheart. You didn't know. I should have asked. I should have questioned. I should have. His shoulders shook. You sent cards. Every birthday. Every Christmas. I sent them back. I didn't even open them. I know. Why? Why did you keep trying? Because you're my son. That doesn't stop just because you're angry with me. Martin quietly gathered his papers and left the room, giving us privacy. We stayed like that for a long time. Brian crying, me holding him, both of us grieving for Robert, for lost years, for the lies that had shaped our lives. Finally, Brian lifted his head. His eyes were swollen, his face blotchy. He looked more real than he had in years. I don't want your money. Brian. No, listen. Dad was right. Everything I have, the ranch, my reputation, my success, it's built on what he did to you. On your sacrifice. I can't keep it knowing that. Your father wanted you to have the ranch. Even with its problems, he wanted you to learn to build something real. Then teach me. He grabbed my hands. Please. I don't know how to do anything real. I only know how to do what Dad taught me, which was apparently how to lie really well. His voice broke again. Teach me to be like you instead. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw past the anger and the hurt to the man he was trying to become. Okay, but it won't be easy. I know. He managed a weak smile. But I've got a pretty good teacher. If she'll forgive me. There's nothing to forgive. You were 16. You trusted your father. I'm 30 now. I've been an adult for 12 years, and I never once questioned his story. I never tried to reach out to you. He shook his head. There's everything to forgive. Then I forgive you. I squeezed his hands. We start fresh. Right now. Today. He nodded, tears starting again. Emma needs to meet her grandmother. My heart clenched. I'd like that. And Heather. God, Heather needs to know the truth. I told her such awful things about you. We'll tell her together. We sat there as the afternoon light shifted through the windows, holding on to each other, starting to build the bridge across 14 years of lies. 4 months later, I stood on the porch of my new Montana ranch house. 15,000 acres stretched out before me, mountains rising in the distance. It was nothing like California. Everything was green and wild and new. Brian's truck pulled up the long driveway. He'd been coming up every other weekend, learning about my plans for the ranch. We were going to run it together. A true partnership this time, mother and son, building something honest from the ground. He climbed out and helped Heather from the passenger side. Then he opened the back door and unbuckled Emma from her car seat. Grandma! Emma ran toward me, her pigtails bouncing. I scooped her up. This miracle child, this piece of my heart I'd thought I'd never know. She smelled like strawberries and sunshine. We brought lunch, Heather called, holding up a basket, and Emma made you a picture at preschool. Did you, sweet girl? Emma nodded seriously. It's our family. See? That's Daddy, and Mommy, and me, and you. She showed me the paper. 4 stick figures holding hands. I'd missed so much. Emma's first words, her first steps, her first day of school, Brian's wedding, years I could never get back. The money didn't change that, nothing could. But I had now. I had today and tomorrow and however many years we'd get to rebuild what we'd lost. Brian came up the porch steps. He still had moments where he'd stumble over calling me Mom, where the old hurt would surface. I still had moments where I'd brace for rejection, waiting for him to leave again. We were learning each other as adults, learning to trust, learning to love without the lies between us. How's the ranch search going? I asked as we settled in the porch chairs, Emma on my lap. Found a property about 40 miles from here, 5,000 acres, perfect for expanding the organic beef operation. He paused. I talked to the bank. They said with the equity from the Sullivan Ranch and your backing, we can make it work. Our backing, I corrected gently. We're partners now. He smiled, a real smile this time. Partners. I like the sound of that. Inside the house, my phone buzzed. Martin Phillips, checking in on some legal documents. The sale of the Carmel house had gone through. I'd donated most of the furniture to charity, kept a few pieces with happy memories from before the lies. I'd put 80 million in a foundation for divorced women rebuilding their lives. Legal fees, education costs, business loans. Too many women lost everything in divorces, especially when their husbands had better lawyers and deeper pockets. The rest I was investing in this, in land and cattle and a future with my son. $50. Robert had left me $50, knowing exactly what would come next. Knowing the drama of that moment would make the truth hit harder. He'd always had a flair for the dramatic. But the real gift wasn't the money, it was the truth. He'd given Brian and me the truth, and with it, a chance to build something real. He'd been right about one thing: nothing built on lies can last. The foundation will always crack, the structure will always fall. But what we build on truth, on forgiveness, on painful honesty, that can weather anything. Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, can I see the horses?" "Of course, baby." I stood, taking her hand. Brian and Heather followed us down to the barn. The Montana sun was warm on my face. Somewhere behind us, our past lay scattered in pieces, broken by lies and betrayal. But ahead of us stretched open land, full of possibility. We were building something new, something honest, something that would last. And this time, I wasn't building it alone.